Engagement, we want to thank you for the comments in the chat box. And if you are scrolling, you can see them, and some of them are really great. If you will, allow me to share just a little bit about PLC Associates, because for some of you, we have people from all over the country. You might not know who we are. We are a results-based consultancy working in the fields of education and business, including both the public and private sectors. PLC Associates, I'm so excited to share, has worked in 19 states in over 1,000 school districts nationwide. Currently, we are providing support to numerous school systems ranging from like the Big Five in New York, so think Buffalo, think Albany, to rural, suburban, and we are just so excited to work with charter schools and ACT schools. The company has a vast range of experience in suburban, urban, and rural districts. So that's just a little bit if you didn't know who we were. And now let me introduce Christina.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. We're delighted to have you here, as we've all mentioned. I'm Christina Lash, one of the associates with this incredible PLC Associates team. Quick introduction about me. I'm a Buffalo, New York gal, born and raised here, Buffalo at heart, go Bills. And education has always been a deep part of who I am. I was first a teacher and then had the privilege of serving as a special education director, a K-8 principal. But over the past 8 years, I've had the incredibly rewarding opportunity to partner shoulder to shoulder with brilliant educators across the country to be a thought partner with them as they strive to create schools where teachers feel a deep sense of efficacy and students are really empowered and successful learners. It's always been true from everything I've ever experienced that when we provide this space and opportunity for teachers and students to come together, they really hold immense power and agency to overcome any challenge in front of them and even to reach those audacious goals in front of them. So this is what's behind my excitement to join Carolyn and you today and hold this space for our learning and sharing together. Carolyn.
Christina, thank you so much. So I grew up in Lockport, New York, which is a suburb of Buffalo near Lake Ontario. So this also makes me a true diehard Bills fan. So go Bills. This slide shares my credentials, but please let me allow you to share a little bit about what isn't on the slide. All I really ever needed to know about life, I learned in kindergarten. I learned how to live, what to do, and how to be. I learned that in kindergarten, and that was my first teaching position. What a great first entry into education for myself. Robert Fulghum continues in his essay to list the things that he learned. And the first thing he puts on his list is share everything. So share everything is Christina and my why today. We are here today to share our exploration of a topic that we're quite passionate about, student learning and high quality engagement. Robert continues to talk about living a balanced life. He says, learn some, think some, draw, paint, sing, dance, play, work every day. And that would be me. A mom of two spectacular human beings and a grandmother of exuberantly heartwarming identical twin girls, Mackenzie and Madison. I have such an appreciation that we are all able to be a part of this learning today. So Christina.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. All right, real quickly, before we dive into our learning today, we wanted to make sure to pause and just share what Carolyn and I deeply believe about adult learners and all of us at PLC Associates. We know that you are joining us today because there was something in the description of our webinar that really spoke to you. It sparked an interest for you. And also you are coming with your own questions. You have your own grapples. And so our aim is to provide a space for you to lean in, do some meaning making, collaborate together around ideas, and just use this opportunity for yourself. And so to support us in being able to do that, we also wanted to really take a moment just to pause. I think now at this point in 2021, 2020 continues, we're all familiar with the Zoom platform, but just in case, we wanted to make sure just to review the features that we'll have in play today. And we do want to invite you to dive in as much as you would like. At certain times, we'll invite you to pop on your mic, react and respond to the ideas at hand. And so that with such a large group that we can manage the mute, unmute, what we would ask is for you to use that raise hand feature. And when you do so, after we've asked you to invited everyone to share, we'll be able to prompt you with a little unmute. And what you'll see is that your mic icon will open up. You'll be able to unmute, and we're going to be excited to hear your voice. The Q&A option is also going to be open for you for the whole webinar. So please also use that feature to interact with Carolyn and me, and also our other PLC associate colleagues that are here. There will also be moments when we ask for you to use the chat box, react, respond. We're really hoping to tap into the collective experiences and the collective wisdom of this group today. So please use those features so that we can hear your voice and your insights. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Carolyn. Carolyn, take us away.
I always say we are smarter and stronger together, so I'm so excited to see the chat box fill up. So thank you, Christina. So on the screen, you see something called the Foundational 5, and you see a graphic. And to understand why we are so passionate and where we are in our endeavors into engagement in remote and in hybrid spaces, we need to go back a few years. So I was partnering with a brilliant mentor and colleague and PLC associate, Jan Letterbine, and we were very busy supporting school districts while reviewing pedagogical research and all of the foremost authors in high quality instructional practice. We reviewed their findings, their comments, their meta-analysis, their action research, to the point where we were beginning to find the same fundamentals over and over again. Jan and I began to sit down to synthesize, to organize, to format detailed components of each of these 5 areas that bubbled up to the top. And you see those on the screen. And you see that it's a cycle because they're completely interdependent and interrelated with one another. So we found through the implementation of these focus areas, we really expedited targeted learning for school districts. This work has been widely welcomed by teachers and leaders in many districts, combined with a guaranteed viable curriculum and partnering tightly with leaders in many districts who have really been able to support fidelity of practice school-wide. We have been having transformational success. So in keeping with what we know to be best practice, let me introduce our learning target for today. So I want to invite you to begin to use the chat box, and I want you to reflect and respond on the learning target that you see on the screen right now. Think of phrases or words, any connections that you're making with this learning target. So the learning target is, I can describe the 3 dimensions of student engagement in remote and hybrid learning. So in the chat box, if there's any wonders, if there's any notices, if there's, what are the 3 dimensions, anything that you want to put in the chat box, feel free. We really want you to interact. So as Brene Brown says, who's one of my closest friends, she doesn't know she's my close friend, but she is. She says, clear is kind and unclear is unkind. It is essential that learners know why they will be learning so that they can own their own learning. They need to know how they're going to learn it and what it's going to look like at the end of a lesson. They explore, they ask questions as they unpack it. And did you know that introducing a learning target is the first time that students engage with the lesson, and it's your first check for understanding. So when I was speaking with Christina, I said, are we going to use a learning target? And we looked at each other and said, of course we are, because we're going to model exactly what we would want for our students in our classrooms and for the districts that we work with. So with that said, what are our intentions for learning today? So I love this picture. So our intentions today are to learn together, to discuss and consider historical and contemporary models of engagement through the decades of teaching and learning, what student engagement looks like, sounds like, and yes, what it even feels like has evolved. Once again, the transformation of traditional classroom to remote and hybrid spaces across this globe has caused educators to re-examine and to really think deeply about what high quality student engagement looks like, sounds like, and yes, feels like in these spaces, which is new to so many in our field. So let's review our flow with the time remaining. We are going to begin with what is engagement, because there are so many different definitions out there, and then we're going to flow right into engagement and disengagement. One of my favorites, we're going to be co-constructing together. No sit and get lecture here. And then what are the B, the C, and the E of engagement? And finally, we're going to end our session with almost a closing circle of dimension discussions. So sound exciting? I think so.
All right,
Christina?
thanks, Carolyn. So the B, the C, and the E of engagement, there's three there, so connected to our learning target. So one of the things that really felt like the first challenge that got raised when COVID happened, after we overcame the challenges of making sure that we had a way to get our kids breakfast and lunch, that they were safe, we knew how to find them and communicate with them, that they had their devices, this question of engagement kept coming up. I'm betting that that sounds familiar for many of you. And so what we found to be true was that more and more, as we started to peel back the layer of the onion with teachers and leaders and kept asking, when you say engagement, what do you mean? It was interesting to hear that what was true for one person's perception about engagement in a remote setting just wasn't necessarily true for someone else's perception about engagement. And so it really became quickly apparent that we could end up in a treadmill situation if we were all chasing engagement, but that we weren't on the same page about what engagement looks like and feels like and sounds like for our students. So one thing that we've done is to really support our teachers and leaders with like, let's take a pause and get regrounded there. So I'm actually going to share in the chat box a Padlet for us to do that co-construction that Carolyn was mentioning. So go ahead and pop open this Padlet. It'll be a live link for you in the chat box. Yeah, and Tony, love what you just added there. Students working together to solve a problem. This can be done in Zoom, absolutely. And we're going to do that together today. So we're going to invite you into this Padlet to add your own ideas about what engagement looks like and feels like and sounds like. So I'm going to change my screen real quickly here so that I can just show this to you. Bear with me one moment here. You're going to see this Padlet. I love it. Somebody already jumped in there. The way that you're going to do this is, if you've never had the chance to be on Padlet, don't worry, you're going to be an expert in about 30 seconds. You're going to be able to just click the bottom right. There's a plus. It'll open up a screen here. All right. And then you can just type in there, let's say students talking together about a text. So you type that in there, and then all you need to do is just click onto the board and it will add your idea. I love watching all of these pop up. The other cool thing about Padlet is that you can build on someone's post. You can like it with a little heart. Let's just pause here for a minute. Keep these coming. Let's strive for at least each person adding at least 5 to our Padlet. Let's see what we can co-construct together. What does engagement look like and sound like?
I'm so busy reading all of these right now, Christina. Students are actively listening. What does that look like? Brain sweat. I love that. Light bulb moment.
Constructive chaos. I get a real vivid idea of what that looks like. Love it. Minds on, not just hands on. Yep. Yep. Powerful. Okay, let's just take 30 more seconds. Keep the ideas coming.
And we're going to keep this padlock open because we're going to be adding to it as we get new information.
Mm-hmm.
So for all the participants, don't close it. Just set it aside in a tab.
Great. All right, Carolyn, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint and I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Because I'm excited now. Because we're talking about the Diva. So engagement is a significant part of learning, and I like to call it the Diva of everything, because you can have the most sophisticated classroom, you can have the best of everything, but if you don't have a student engaged, the learning is not going to be as meaningful, and it's going to be difficult at best as a teacher to facilitate instruction and for the students to learn. It is not just a one-dimensional notion. Not only does it concern the student's ability to pay attention in class, but he or she should be actively engaged as well. When students are actively engaged, they're learning how to think deeply. However, far too often, schools mistake compliance with engagement, as you see in this picture, and you can read the quote from Todd Finley on the screen. A compliant learner does what's expected. They follow the directions, they complete assignments, they get good grades with just the right amount of participation, but their hearts aren't truly in it. Just because a student is behaving or doing school and complying to the academic standards, if he or she isn't actively making meaning out of the information, then active engagement still has not been achieved. And now my favorite slide. You know I love these words. Visible delight at accomplishing the work. Did you know that the term engagement hails from mid-17th century association with fencers? Imagine competitors facing off with their foils, all of their senses focused on the micro adjustments of their opponent's blade, as well as their own physical, emotional, and intellectual potential. When the fencers are lunging and circling in feint, this fierce ballet is called engagement. So you might want to ask, how do I know this fun fact? I engaged in a fencing class when I was in college. No, I don't have a photo of it. Engaged, focused students learn and share their thoughts without being prodded. They engage in self-regulation. They think about their thinking in relationship to learning targets. They consider feedback and critique themselves. Self-critique, peers critiquing, teacher feedback, thought partners. They create goals and they ask questions. They ponder considerations quite similar to these fencers. When a student is not fully engaged, what is the result? If the fencers were not fully engaged, what might be the result? Physical harm might come to them. What kind of harm is happening to our students when they're not fully engaged? Let's begin to look at the benefits of engagement with Christina.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Carolyn. And so we would encourage you also to keep that Padlet open, keep constructing as a landing page for us to just keep adding to together as new understandings about engagement come to you. And so we wanted to start here first. So the reality was when COVID happened and we needed to pivot to remote and hybrid, we knew at PLC Associates that we needed some trusted voices in education to turn to help us know how do we respond in this moment. And And of course, so we ended up turning to Fisher and Fry and Hattie, three very trusted voices in education. And so their distance learning playbook, K through 12, really gave us the just right starting point for supporting our team's learning, but then also for our district partners in thinking about how do we plan for meaningful engagement and meaningful learning in a remote space. This text reminded us about why engagement matters. And I'm sure most of this looks familiar to you already. Improved academic achievement, satisfaction, persisting through academic struggles, less likely to drop out of school. Use that chat box to keep building on this. Why does engagement matter? Why should we care? Equally important is knowing why engagement matters is the fact that disengagement is something that really should make us all sit up straight, consider where do we have agency? Where do we have influence to create learning spaces, including those remote spaces that invite that student engagement? Disengagement is not merely the plight of outlier students. What research shows us, according to a 2013 Gallup poll, is that 8 out of 10 elementary school students are engaged, 6 out of 10 middle school students, and 4 in 10 high school students. And so that progressive decline in engagement, as Brandon Busty, the executive director in Gallup, reported, it's a national collective failure. Yeah, if you could imagine that scene, Tony, thank you for the Bueller from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So let's get back to that idea though. Let's think about, so if we're all on a different page about engagement, how are we going to go after it? What are we going to do about it if we're all chasing after something different? What would be the power if we all had that collective agreement and if we were all aligned on what is engagement so that we can really think about designing for engagement? So here's what we're going to do. I am going to drop a link in the chat box again to the same Padlet, just in case you lost it. Here it comes. But if you still have it open, keep adding. Carolyn's going to stay in that Padlet space with you all, and I'm going to be sharing. We're going to do a little guided gallery walk. And so we're going to use that Padlet space for a chalk talk. And this is the moment that you've been waiting for. What is that B, C, and E about engagement that Carolyn tipped you off to when we were first looking at our learning target? That's what we're going to look at. So keep using that Padlet space. Keep building, keep reacting, keep refining your ideas about engagement. And we're aiming toward that learning target about describing the 3 dimensions. Because here's what we know. We know that you are all ready to go to these lengths to get your students' attention. And you're willing to do this. Because this kind of a thing just always feels like you're just speaking to no one out there. And so that feeling of is hello, is there anyone out there? Is anyone engaged?
Crickets.
Crickets, hello, is anyone there? We know that that's not what you want either. It's what we want to encourage for our students to be engaged. And at the same time, Carolyn and I would like to just challenge you a little to consider, is a camera on a sign of engagement? Okay. So let's start doing our gallery walk. So the first dimension of engagement is behavioral engagement. And these are probably those signs of engagement that readily read to you as a signal that kids are engaged, right? They've got their hands up, they've got their camera on, they're sitting down, they're doing their work, they're turning in assignments. But this is really at the heart of that debate about the difference between engagement and compliance. And so what it really forces us to do is think, so how else do we think about engagement? What else do we know about engagement? Keep adding to that Padlet. Keep refining your thinking. There's the second dimension, so cognitive engagement. So when we think about learning that is challenging and opportunities for students to reflect, ask themselves, where am I now? Where are we going? How do I meet the learning target? How will I know that I've met the learning target? What do I need to learn to get there? those opportunities really bring students into this kind of cognitive engagement that will oftentimes be covert. It's hard to see, it's hard to observe, unless there's that intentional move on the part of a teacher to create those opportunities for this kind of reflection. So unpacking learning targets with students, helping them with target trackers, thinking about goal setting, those kinds of intentional moves really support that kind of cognitive engagement that we want to be able to provide for our students.
So just a little report from the Padlet. We have people adding to it, and it's really like a chalk talk, a silent conversation. We have, it sounds like a conversation about the content, and then people are talking about, is it active learning? So lots of people are responding. So this is great. We even have people putting in websites where they can find more information.
Fantastic. See, this is exactly what we were hoping for, tapping into the collective smarts of this group. You bring people together and provide them with sticky notes and chart paper, and a Padlet is the equivalent of that. I'm pretty sure we can solve any problem out there. We can do it. Love it. Keep it coming. So we've got behavioral, cognitive, and our third one is emotional engagement. So this is so much about students feeling that deep sense of belonging, having trusting relationships that really allow them to feel compelled to engage in the learning process with their peers. This is another time when teachers play such a critical role in designing learning spaces, creating that culture where students are invited to build relationships with each other, and also to ensure that students feel that inclusivity of a space where they feel like they belong. There's safety and there's belonging. And so really cultivating that sense of belonging is what's going to allow students to volunteer ideas, take risks in a small group with a whole class. But if we have not done the work of tending to emotional engagement and those emotional needs for students, we're probably not going to see this kind of engagement, again, covert, not so easy to see readily. However, using discussion protocols, making sure that there's equity of voices, making sure that that you provide opportunities for students to do their own thinking first and then test ideas with each other in smaller groups or partnerships before they take those ideas live with the rest of the class. Those kinds of ideas, much like what we're doing right now with a gallery walk and a chalk talk, really ripple effect. Janet Gilmeister in the chat box says, yeah, these are the types of intentional teacher moves that really foster students being able to feel like they can take that risk. Right. Carolyn, report from the Padlet.
I'm reporting from the Padlet, and I think that what would be really nice is to give people maybe, like a minute to go in to the Padlet and just process the last 3 sides. And one of the things I know for sure is I look, what people have written. Is it cognitive engagement? Is it behavioral engagement? What are the different kinds of engagement are you seeing, and name them so we can begin to get clear on what it is, if it's behavioral, if it's the cognitive, if it's the emotional engagement. Because we have some strands going. One brain sweat, so this is definitely cognitive engagement. Students do need to struggle in the learning process. I agree, love the productive struggle. Sometimes we call it grapple. So if people could go into the Padlet and just kind of read what has been written and then add on to people's thinking. Really interesting. I love that someone wrote, I don't think camera on is a sign of engagement, but I do think it's easier to measure if they're engaged, if it is on. We have that, we don't have the proximity, but we have the visual cues. And someone else just wrote, a camera on could be a sign of emotional engagement. Oh my goodness, please keep I feel like I'm at a telethon and I'm just reading all of these wonderful, wonderful comments and thought partners with one another. And a lot of people have hearts, students are actively listening. So we have to observe that. What does that look like? What does that sound like?
Great. Great. I want to give us just one last layer here. And so thinking about this continuum of engagement. So what are those covert ways to or overt ways to measure whether or not students are engaged? What does it look like? And then when we have more clarity about what it looks like when students are engaged behaviorally, cognitively, emotionally, then how do we start designing learning toward that? Amy Berry, an educational researcher, she interviewed hundreds of teachers about the concept of engagement. Really, what she was trying to do was to tease out that distinction between compliance and engagement. And when she synthesized all of those ideas, what came together was this continuum of engagement. And so I'm going to peel back the kind of layers here. You can see there's the passive is a kind of a line in the middle, and then there's active on either sides of this. And so kids are very actively engaged on either sides of the continuum here. But what she really wanted to be able to do was to articulate this continuum, because the place where she really wants us to think about is how do we move from doing to driving? So doing learning to driving learning. And so what does that really look like for students? At the participating level, you can see what students are doing. At the investing level and at the driving level, you can see what students are doing. So you can start to think about, so what are those intentional moves that teachers are making to move from that doing to driving? Of course, also just some red flags to keep our eyes out for when we start to see students slipping into that withdrawing, slipping into that avoiding before they get to a place of disrupting because they're active over there on that end of the spectrum. But that's not exactly where we want them to be. That's not where they want to be either. So we really want to think about how do we move them from doing to driving. I will also just add super quickly, one of the ways that a school that I support in New York State has thought about tackling this is that they've really looked at, okay, so what does engagement look like and feel like and sound like? And then as a whole community of learners together, the teachers have come together to say, all right, there's one aspect of remote learning that this small group wants to get good at. There's another aspect of remote learning that this group really wants to get good at. And so this one group has said, we want to learn how to do breakout rooms really well with our students and how to use that as a way to get kids emotionally engaged with each other and cognitively engaged. But there's another group that said, you know what, we need to get better at designing asynchronous tasks. We can't be on the screen all the time. And so we want to learn how to do asynchronous tasks better. Bringing those teachers together with the clarity of the understanding about what engagement looks like and feels like and sounds like, and then intentionally designing for all of those has been really empowering for them and has allowed them to really tap into all of the good wisdom that they have as teachers and as leaders. And it's been empowering for them and it's been impactful for their students. Right. Carolyn, I'm going to turn it back to you.
So before I begin with the next slide, I did want to share that there is a question in the Q&A box. Are you discussing how to reach these 3 levels of engagement? And I know, Christina, you were starting to type an answer, but I think this is a question that probably a lot of people have on their minds. So did you want to begin to explain that, and then I can add to it?
Sure. What I would say is, so the question is how to reach these 3 levels of engagement. And one of the things that we would encourage you always to think about is the student experience first. And so really thinking about if this is what emotional and cognitive and behavioral engagement looks like, do we know if our students feel emotionally engaged? Do we know if they feel cognitively engaged? First, starting with the why, when really empathizing with students and stepping into their shoes and thinking about what, if students are turning their cameras on, why are they turning their cameras on? If they're not, why are they not? If students are quiet in a breakout group, why are they quiet in a breakout group? Is it that we just made an assumption that kids would be able to carry over what they knew how to do with a pair share in a classroom to a breakout group without really first helping them adjust the technology that they needed to have that conversation? Or is there a different reason? So the closer that we can get to our own students and thinking about what are the barriers to that engagement, what is keeping them just at that participating level, will often help us to get toward that driving. Carolyn, please feel free to add on there.
And I think you're absolutely right. We need to begin by thinking about the student. I also know that there are different look fors when you are thinking about your students' engagement in a remote or hybrid setting than there are when you're in the traditional classroom. And that's something that Christina and I are exploring and going to be working on in further learning sessions that we will be having.
All right.
So we can go on to the next slide. So now we know the B, the C, and the E of engagement. And what we would like to do right now is invite you to activate your prior knowledge about how you have addressed each dimension instructionally. And you may not even have thought about engagement in those three dimensions before. So this could be very new. And now you're thinking, well, if I think they're engaged because they have their hand up, well, that's a behavior. And so is there one that's more critical than the other? So there's lots and lots to think about when we think about instruction and curricular design. So take a moment to read the 4 prompts. And what we would like to do is have conversations, and we can do this in 2 ways. The first way is that you can respond in the chat box, or you can respond in the Q&A. And we also, this is an opportunity where if you put your hand up, we're going to invite you to turn your mic on and we could have a discussion that way. So we want a flurry of thinking and reflecting and questions and building on this. So the 4 prompts, are there some forms of engagement that you have favored to let you know if students are engaged? Are there some forms of engagement that you have not been as tuned into? What else can you intentionally be looking for and planning for to know that students are engaged? And then what are 2 moves that you will try to commit to? Okay.
This is great, Carolyn. We already have lots of wonderful ideas popping into the chat box here.
I know, I'm so excited. I really have to hone in on, I'm going to lean into Jenny. Students setting individual goals helps keep them engaged. I am all about self-assessment, self-regulation, thinking about their thinking. You go, girl. I'm loving that. I am loving that. Kathleen, I love knee to knee, eye to eye as a strategy that to get knee to knee, eye to eye. I'm a listener, I'm a speaker. So I think about how do I do knee to knee, eye to eye if everybody is remote? How do we make that happen? For kindergartners, pre-K through 12th grade. This is what Christina and I are diving deeply into.
Mm-hmm. Paige, really appreciate what you've put here too about helping educators explore that B, C, and E of engagement. So the behavioral, the cognitive, and the emotional engagement, and how to focus beyond just cognitive engagement. We're hoping that this session itself, you'll really be able to replicate with your teams. because there really is power in having shared language and shared understanding for something before you go try to solution find around where there are challenges. That's great. And if someone is interested in popping on their mic, we would love to hear some other voices. Please raise your hand and we will allow you to unmute. Megan, thanks for popping in. A commitment that you're willing to try. That's great that this something feels very actionable for you today. Wonderful.
Our hope is really that you can go back and implement this tomorrow into your classroom, into your lesson planning, and into instruction, thinking about the type of engagement that is in a lesson plan, and then intentionally really looking it over and finding places where little micro moves where you can add maybe some emotional engagement or a task that will help give them some more cognitive engagement.
Right. Carolyn, I think we might need to wrap up. It looks like we're getting some great ideas. Keep them coming. But I think we do have to wrap up.
Okay, we can, and hopefully we can send the Padlet responses to everybody. So we really sincerely thank all of you for taking time out of your day. We know how finite and precious time is. It has been our pleasure being able to spend time with each of you as keepers of our most precious resources, our students, our scholars. You can see that the screen has information, contact information for us. So thank you so much. Christina?
Great. We just want you to know too, we'd love to keep the conversation going on social media. Feel free to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn so we can follow you back and we can keep learning together. This is just an incredible moment of time in education where we really have an opportunity to lean in and learn together and just come together in a way that will impact all of our kids in a way that will just be memorable and impactful for generations.
And Christina, I see a gift box.
There is a gift box, Carolyn.
There's a gift. Do you want to explain the gift?
Yes, I love the gift.
I love the
gift. Thank you so much for being here. What we really wanted to do was also just to share with you freely the agenda that we use today, the materials that we use, so our PowerPoint deck, and then also just to share that with you as a follow-up email along with our recording for today. So please feel free to use this, share this broadly. Hopefully it will spark some really good conversation with you and your teams.
So let me just thank you both. What a wonderful presentation, and to all of you for spending time with us. And who knew? It's your birthday. There's your birthday gift. We really believe in building capacity. So that's why we're offering the free events and we're making that available month by month with the kinds of topics that you're all requesting. So with that, much gratitude. We thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.